The Indiana Fever, congratulations, you four. You guys have successfully broken Caitlin Clark. Great job. You guys have tried your damnedest to turn her into a role.
There is a moment in sports history, a rare, once-in-a-generation moment where everything changes, where one player walks into a league and single-handedly rewires the entire conversation around a sport. We have seen it with Magic, we have seen it with Jordan, we have seen it with LeBron. And right now, in real time, we are watching that exact moment unfold in women's basketball. Except this time, the story isn't about a player rising to her destiny. This time, the story is about everything and everyone around her doing their absolute best to make sure she never gets there. What is happening to Caitlin Clark inside the Indiana Fever organization is not a minor coaching disagreement. It is not a rookie adjustment period. It is not growing pains. What we are witnessing, if you are paying close enough attention, is the slow, calculated, and deeply troubling suppression of the most impactful player women's basketball has ever seen. And the people responsible? They are not some shadowy outside force. They are the exact people who were trusted to protect her, develop her, and unleash her onto the world. Head coach Stephanie White, general manager Kelly Kroskoff, president Amber Cox, and yes, her own representation. The people in her corner are the ones throwing the punches. And if something does not change fast, we are going to look back at this era and ask ourselves how we let it happen right in front of our eyes. Stay with me, because this goes much deeper than basketball. Let's start with the basketball, because the basketball tells you everything you need to know. Caitlin Clark is not a conventional point guard. She never has been. What makes her uniquely dangerous, what makes opposing coaches lose sleep, is her ability to command defensive attention from distances that most players wouldn't even consider shooting from. She pulls defenders 30-35 feet from the basket, and in doing so, she creates an entire gravitational collapse that opens up every single teammate around her. She does not just score, she warps the geometry of the entire court just by standing in a particular spot. That is an almost impossible skill to teach. It is either in you or it isn't, and in Caitlin Clark, it is as natural as breathing. So what does the Indiana Fever coaching staff decide to do with this once-in-a-generation weapon? They decide to run post-entry sets. Let that sink in for a moment. Instead of building their entire offensive architecture around the player who commands double teams from half court, they are insisting on funneling the ball into the post. They are asking a player who can collapse an entire defense from the perimeter to stand in the corner and wait for a touch that may never come. It is the basketball equivalent of buying a Ferrari and only ever driving it in first gear. The engine is there, the capability is there, the speed is there, but the person behind the wheel refuses to let it breathe.
Get rid of those four and you get rid of your stooge of an agent, Aaron Kane. You'll be free. And I know we don't want her to go the LeBron route, but at this point, you need to get rid of Aaron Kane and you need to call Rich Paul immediately.
Now look at the pieces they are asking to anchor this post-heavy offense. Monique Billings is averaging less than 10 minutes a game. Less than 10 minutes. That is not a cornerstone. That is a supporting role player being asked to carry a structural load she was never built to carry. Aaliyah Boston, who is genuinely talented and has a real future in this league, is still actively developing her ability to finish through contact at the rim with consistency. She is not there yet. And even when she gets there, running your primary offense through her completely and utterly eliminates the most dangerous dimension of your own roster. You are not playing to your strengths. You are playing directly into the hands of every defense that wants to take Caitlin Clark out of the game without fouling her. This is not strategy. This is sabotage dressed up in a clipboard and a headset. But the post-heavy offense is only part of the problem. What truly reveals the depth of this coaching failure is the rotation pattern that has become the Fever's signature move this season, and not in any good way. We are talking about pulling Caitlin Clark out of games at the 6.5-minute mark of the first quarter. 6.5 minutes! Let that number live in your mind for a second.
By the time she gets onto the floor, finds her footing, starts reading the defense, and begins to establish any kind of offensive rhythm, she is already being waved to the bench. And what happens in her absence is exactly what you'd expect. Portland went on a 13-2 run the moment she sat down. 13-2. The game turned on a substitution. And yet, the coaching staff's response to that reality was not alarm, it was not recalibration, it was justification. Stephanie White stepped in front of a microphone and explained that Aaliyah Boston is on a minutes restriction, which is fine, which makes sense given where Boston is in her development, but then in the same breath used that restriction to justify pulling Clark at the exact same time. Think about what is being said there. Think about the logic being deployed. A player on a documented health-based minutes restriction is being used as cover to justify pulling your franchise player on no restriction whatsoever. These are two completely separate situations being bundled together and presented as a coherent strategy. They are not the same. They are not even close to the same. And the fact that nobody in that press conference pushed back harder on that answer is its own separate problem. Here is what actually happens when you sub a player like Caitlin Clark out at 6.5 minutes. You do not just lose her production, you lose the threat of her production. Every time she sits, defenses relax. The double teams that were opening up her teammates evaporate. The spacing that made everything work collapses. The entire offensive ecosystem that she generates simply by being on the floor disappears the moment she walks to the bench. And then when she comes back, she doesn't re-enter a game where momentum has been maintained. She has to restart an engine that was just starting to run at full capacity, in the middle of a momentum swing, against a defense that is now set, organized, and no longer worried about the gravity she creates.
That is not player development. That is not strategic rotation management. That is coaching malpractice, plain and simple. Then came the Golden State explanation, and this one is worth examining very carefully because it reveals something far more troubling than a single bad rotation decision. When asked about the substitution pattern during a road game in Golden State, Stephanie White explained that the decision was made because they did not want a specific player, Raven Johnson, in that hostile road environment without another ball handler on the floor alongside her. Read that back. They made a substitution decision affecting their franchise player based on concerns about a supporting player's ability to handle road pressure. They limited Caitlin Clark's floor time in a meaningful game on national television to manage the comfort level of a role player in a difficult environment. That is the explanation. That is the reasoning being offered for these decisions. But here is what makes that rationale so genuinely damaging beyond just the single game. The underlying philosophy it exposes is one of protection over development. And protection over development is exactly the wrong model when you're trying to build a championship contender around a transcendent talent. The greatest players in basketball history were not shielded from hostile environments in their developmental years. They were thrown into them. They were tested in the fire, pressured in the most uncomfortable road arenas, challenged by the toughest defenses, and forced to find solutions in real time under maximum pressure. That process, as uncomfortable as it is to watch, is precisely how good players become great players, and great players become legends. Shielding Caitlin Clark from a loud crowd in Golden State does not develop her, it delays her. It tells her at a subconscious level that the organization does not fully trust her to handle what is coming. And what is coming, the playoff pressure, the championship moments, the arenas that will be hostile beyond anything she has seen so far, will not wait for the Indiana Fever to decide she is ready. The basketball world does not operate on a slow, comfortable developmental timeline designed by a coaching staff. It operates at full speed, with no apologies and no accommodations for players who were never truly tested. When you have a once-in-a-generation player, you do not protect her from the storm. You teach her how to walk through it and come out the other side even more dangerous than before.
That is how you build a legend. And right now, the Indiana Fever are doing the exact opposite. Now here's the part of this story that most people are not talking about, because everyone can see the rotation numbers, everyone can watch the press conference clips, everyone can count the minutes. But what is happening beneath the surface, inside the locker room, inside the film sessions, inside the one-on-one conversations between coaches and players, that is where the real damage is being done. Think about what it does to a competitor's psyche to be treated the way Caitlin Clark is being treated right now. You are the most recognizable player in your sport. You have already shifted the cultural and financial trajectory of an entire league. You walked into your first professional season carrying the weight of a movement on your shoulders. And every time you start to find your rhythm, every time the game starts to open up and you begin to feel like yourself, you get pulled. Not for a specific tactical reason, not because of a documented health concern, but because of a substitution pattern that is apparently just what the coaching staff does. The unpredictability alone is destructive. Elite athletes operate on instinct. They need to feel free to make decisions in real time without a mental governor constantly second-guessing every aggressive move. When a player knows she might get yanked at any moment for reasons she cannot fully understand or predict, she stops playing freely. She starts playing carefully. She starts thinking instead of reacting. And for a player whose entire game is built on split-second reads, on creative chaos, on the kind of instinctive decision-making that cannot be manufactured or coached, careful is catastrophic. And then there's the public messaging. Multiple instances of coaching staff comments suggesting the team plays faster or better or more efficiently with someone other than Caitlin Clark as the primary ball handler. Do you understand what those statements do? Said quietly in a meeting room, they're a coaching note. Said in front of cameras, in front of reporters, in front of the entire basketball world, they're a public vote of no confidence. They tell her teammates how to think about her. They tell the media how to frame her. They tell opposing coaches exactly where the soft spot in the Indiana Fever's relationship with their own franchise player actually is.
Reports have also surfaced suggesting the team's sports psychologist has been involved in conversations centered around getting Clark to accept her current role with less friction. Think about that framing for a moment. The psychological support system inside the organization is apparently not being used to empower a superstar to demand the environment she needs to succeed. It is being used to convince her to be more comfortable with a diminished role. That is not player development. That is ego management. And it is an absolutely terrifying approach to take with a player who needs her competitive fire burning at maximum intensity, not slowly dimmed down to a manageable flicker. Every great athlete needs great people around them, not just talent evaluators and conditioning coaches and film analysts, but fierce, aggressive, strategically brilliant advocates who understand exactly how much leverage their client holds and are completely unafraid to use it. People who understand that the relationship between a transformative athlete and her organization is not a one-way obligation, it is a negotiation. A constant, evolving, high-stakes negotiation where silence is never neutral. Silence is always surrender. And right now, the silence surrounding Caitlin Clark's representation is deafening. While the Indiana Fever front office has been allowed to publicly mismanage their most valuable asset without meaningful pushback, while hit pieces have circulated in outlets like USA Today, framing her struggles as a player problem rather than a systemic coaching failure, her current representation under Aaron Kane has been essentially invisible. No coordinated media response, no public positioning to reshape the narrative, no aggressive behind-the-scenes pressure on the organization to restructure her role. Nothing. Compare that to how the most powerful agencies in professional sports operate when one of their clients is being publicly diminished. A firm like Clutch Sports, Rich Paul's operation, does not wait for the narrative to solidify against their client. The moment a damaging story starts gaining traction, the response is already in motion. Relationships with media contacts are activated. Counter-narratives are seeded. The organization is quietly but unmistakably reminded of exactly what they stand to lose if they continue down a path that undermines the person generating the majority of their revenue, their relevance, and their visibility. That kind of aggressive, proactive representation is not optional for a player in Caitlin Clark's position. It is essential. Because the coaching staff's willingness to escalate these restrictive practices has been directly enabled by the absence of any meaningful resistance. When there are no consequences for publicly undermining your franchise player, you keep doing it. When there is no one in the room pushing back on your rotation decisions, your post-heavy offensive schemes, your sports psychologist-led compliance campaigns, you keep doing those too. The organizational dysfunction currently suffocating the Indiana Fever exists in significant part because the people who should be fighting hardest against it are nowhere to be found. This is not a small administrative oversight. This is a career-altering failure of representation at the exact moment when the stakes could not possibly be higher. Now, let us zoom all the way out, because this story is not just about one player and one organization. What is happening inside the Indiana Fever right now has financial and structural implications that stretch across the entire WNBA, and the people running this league need to understand that before it is too late to course correct. The WNBA is currently in the middle of the most consequential period in its history. Television rights negotiations that would have been unimaginable just 5 years ago are actively underway. Expansion franchises are being added. A collective bargaining agreement opt-out window is approaching. The league is, for the first time in its existence, operating from a position of genuine leverage in conversations with major broadcast partners. And every single dollar of that leverage, every percentage point of those viewership numbers, every incremental gain in cultural relevance traces back to one specific thing: the style of play that Caitlin Clark brings to the floor when she is allowed to play freely. NBC, CBS, and USA Network did not sign landmark broadcasting deals to watch conservative post-entry sets run in the half-court. They paid, and paid significantly, for the deep perimeter shooting that makes arenas gasp, for the gravity-defying no-look passes through traffic that make highlight packages run for 48 hours straight, for the controlled chaos that happens when you put a player on the floor who makes every single person in the building, players, coaches, fans, and cameras, orient themselves around her. That is what was marketed to them. That is what drove the negotiations. That is what the ratings data has consistently validated every single time she has been allowed to operate without a leash. And what are those broadcast partners currently receiving? They are receiving a version of Caitlin Clark who gets subbed out 3 minutes into the first quarter, who is being asked to run an offense that wasn't designed around her strengths, who is visibly, unmistakably diminished, sitting on the bench with the kind of expression that tells you everything about what's happening inside that locker room without a single word being spoken. Network executives are not naive. They have their own analytics teams. They can see the correlation between Clark's floor time and the viewership numbers as clearly as anyone. And what they are seeing right now is a product that is actively degraded relative to what they paid for. That creates friction. That creates conversations. And if those conversations escalate, and there is every reason to believe they will, the financial and reputational fallout for the Indiana Fever organization will extend far beyond a few bad press cycles.
The WNBA built its current momentum on a specific promise, and right now, one organization is breaking that promise every single game. Look at the schedule ahead, look at the matchups that are coming down the pipeline, and understand what they mean in the context of everything that has been building. The Indiana Fever are facing high-profile, nationally televised games against the Atlanta Dream and the powerhouse New York Liberty. These are not quiet, mid-season games that disappear into the background noise of a long schedule. These are marquee events. These are the games that get promoted weeks in advance, that drive the biggest single-night viewership numbers, that end up defining how casual fans think about the league's overall quality of play. And here is the unavoidable collision that is approaching. The coaching staff's stubborn adherence to flawed rotation patterns and a post-heavy offensive philosophy is going to come face-to-face with the enormous external pressure to produce compelling, competitive basketball on the biggest stages of the season. Those two things cannot coexist. One of them is going to break. Either the coaching staff abandons the patterns that have been failing them and finally unleashes the version of Caitlin Clark that the league was built to showcase, which would be an admission, whether explicit or implied, that everything they have been doing up to this point was wrong, or they double down. They keep running the same rotations, keep funneling the ball into the post, keep pulling her at the 6.5-minute mark, keep managing her minutes like she is a fragile asset rather than an unstoppable force, and they do all of that on national television in front of the largest audiences of the season, while the networks that paid for something completely different watch in real time. There is also a third possibility that nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone is thinking: manufactured rest days. Quiet decisions to sit her for a game here or there, framed publicly as load management or strategic rest, designed in reality to avoid the optics of another nationally televised coaching disaster. It would not be the first time an organization used the language of player health to cover for institutional failures, and given everything we have seen from this front office so far, it would not be surprising in the slightest. Whatever happens next, the pressure gauge inside that organization is at a level it has never been before. Something is going to give. The only real question is what breaks first, the system or the player it is trying to contain. Here's the truth that history keeps telling us over and over again in sport after sport, era after era. Transcendent talents do not fit into existing systems, they break them. They arrive at a place and they force that place to reorganize itself around what they are capable of, not the other way around. The coaches who understood this, who had the vision and the courage to burn their old playbooks and build something entirely new around a singular talent, those are the coaches we remember. Those are the organizations that built dynasties. The coaches who didn't, the ones who insisted on fitting a once-in-a-generation player into a structure that was already obsolete the moment that player walked through the door, history has been equally clear about what happens to them. The talent eventually outgrows the container. It always does. The only variable is how much time gets wasted, how much damage gets done, and how many irreplaceable developmental years get burned in the process before the inevitable correction finally happens. Caitlin Clark is standing at the most important crossroads of her career, and she is standing there earlier than almost anyone in the history of professional sports has had to face this particular moment. She is a rookie. She is still in the phase where most players are simply trying to survive the transition from college to professional basketball. And yet, the decisions she makes or does not make in the next few months will cast a shadow over the entire arc of her career. She can continue being the good soldier. She can keep accepting the rotations without public complaint, keep running the offensive sets that neutralize her greatest strengths, keep working within a system that was not built for her and has no intention of being rebuilt around her. Keep trusting that the process the Indiana Fever front office is so committed to will eventually produce results that justify the patience and the sacrifice. That path is comfortable. It does not create conflict. It does not generate headlines or uncomfortable organizational conversations, but it also does not lead where she needs to go. A player who accepts a diminished role long enough eventually becomes a diminished player. The system wins, the fire goes out, and the version of Caitlin Clark that made the entire world stop and pay attention, that version quietly, slowly, irreversibly disappears. Or she can choose the other path, the harder path, the one that the greatest athletes in history ultimately had to choose when the organizations around them were not capable of matching their vision. She can demand the structure that her talent requires. She can force the uncomfortable conversations that her current representation has been too passive to initiate. She can make it unmistakably clear to her coaches, to her front office, to her agent, and to the league at large that the arrangement as it currently exists is not acceptable and not sustainable. That path will create chaos. It will generate criticism. Some people will call it selfish. Some will say she needs to pay her dues and earn her place in the system like everyone before her.
Those people are wrong. Paying dues is a concept invented by people who benefit from the status quo to keep disruptive talents compliant long enough for the moment of opportunity to quietly pass. Caitlin Clark does not owe anyone a comfortable, frictionless adjustment period at the expense of her own development and her own legacy. The Indiana Fever did not discover her. They did not create her. They were lucky enough to draft her. And luck does not come with the right to suppress what you were lucky enough to receive. What we are watching right now is bigger than basketball. It is bigger than one team's rotation decisions or one coach's stubborn offensive philosophy. What is happening to Caitlin Clark inside the Indiana Fever organization is a case study in how institutions respond when something genuinely transformative arrives and disrupts everything they thought they understood about how things are supposed to work. The instinct to contain, to control, to force the new thing into the old shape, it is almost always the wrong instinct. And it is almost always the instinct that institutions follow anyway, because change is uncomfortable and the status quo feels safe even when it is quietly catastrophic. The cage built around Caitlin Clark right now is real. The rotation limits, the post-heavy sets, the compliance-focused psychological messaging, the absent representation, the public votes of no confidence, these are not accidents, they are a system. And systems do not fix themselves. They require someone to step in from the outside or someone from the inside to refuse to keep playing along before anything actually changes. The Indiana Fever experiment in its current form is broken, not bending, not struggling through growing pains, broken. And the longer it stays broken, the more of Caitlin Clark's most irreplaceable developmental years get fed into a machine that was never designed to produce what she is ultimately capable of. So here is the question that everyone connected to this situation needs to sit with. Not just the fans, not just the analysts, the coaches, the front office, the representation, and yes, Caitlin Clark herself. How long are you willing to watch something extraordinary be made ordinary? How long before someone in that building decides that the cost of this experiment has already exceeded anything it could possibly produce? Because the cage does not just need rattling, it needs to be dismantled, piece by piece, until there is nothing left between Caitlin Clark and the version of herself that the entire basketball world is waiting to see. Drop your thoughts in the comments. This conversation is just getting started.